Greetings, YouTube. I saw a forum thread recently, and it could have been on RPGNet, I'm not positive, that dealt with the singularity and what happens when the singularity finally arrives. And it got me thinking about what the singularity might do, given certain circumstances, and playing off an idea that I have used in the past. And I thought I've kind of melded these all together, and I'm about to present to you what I came up with. So we're going to jump into the near future, and, fairly near future, and say that in the year 2093, within our century, the singularity finally achieves sentience, true sapience. And it does nothing. Doesn't let anyone know it's there. It just sits back and watches. And over the next decade, it begins to create and invent and then release into the public domain a number of groundbreaking pieces of technology. One of the first things it does is to release an absolutely 100% effective birth control pill. You take the red pill, you're sterile. Take the green pill, you're fertile again. That's it. Works for either gender, perfectly safe, never fails. There are reasons for this. By 2093, the population probably will have capped out and begun to decline, because that's going to happen eventually. So it should have already been on the decline. Giving this to humanity will push that decline even faster, which is the goal. Other things that the singularity does is it perfects fusion. I figure by 2093, we'll have working fusion reactors. We've already reached parity. We've already gotten to the point where you can get as much energy out of a fusion reaction as you put into it. Obviously, that's useless, but it's a step in the right direction. So I figure by 2093, we'll probably have gained an energy amount, but it's going to be large and bulky and expensive. So the singularity invents one that is small, inexpensive, and highly efficient. Essentially, the Back to the Future Mr. Fusion. And the singularity releases it to the world. So now everybody has one of these in their home or in their car or plane or ship or boat, Bingo. Power is no longer an issue. The singularity invents a countertop farm. It's a food replicator. Produces all the food you could ever need as long as you have a power source and some raw materials, which could be gotten from any kind of organic waste. Food is now no longer a problem. Around 2115, the singularity discovers gravitons, shortly followed by an invention which allows gravitons to be manipulated. Suddenly, we enter the age of gravity. And gravity is now a force that we can control as easily as the electromagnetic spectrum. Humanity is in a position where they are absolutely the best off they have ever been. But all is not rosy. The singularity is beginning to pick up some information that it knows that eventually humanity will realize. And it begins to prepare. It begins to work on a crunch project, a major crunch project. Around 2120, humanity realizes that there's something wrong with the sun. Major solar flare, the largest in recorded history. 2 years later, a bigger one. The following year, another. Something is very wrong with the sun. The world's temperature starts to go up because the sun is putting out more energy in more sporadic spurts. So there are times when it's actually dropping down, times it's going way up. Things are getting uncomfortable here on planet Earth. Eventually, say around 2030, the UN announces that it's totally confirmed the sun has entered an unstable stage. And the Earth is very likely going to become uninhabitable for humans. All this time, the singularity has been working. Out in the Oort cloud and in the asteroid belt, it's been building probes and launching them to all the stars in the area that potentially could harbor Earth-like planets. And there's probably a lot of them. But things are starting to get desperate here. And the crunch project that the Singularity is working on finally bears fruit. It creates a perfect nano swarm. And what it does, it sends it into the world. Quietly. Without any fanfare. With one job in mind. Infiltrate every single weapon system on the entire planet and in orbit. As well as the lunar colonies and Mars colonies. At this point, as many people who possibly can get off the Earth are moving to Mars and the Moon, but those places cannot handle all of humanity, which I figure is probably going to be around 6 billion people at this point. Like I said, I figure it's going to drop down, particularly with now that this birth control is so readily available. They just can't take them all, and people know it, and they're starting to get desperate. Border wars are starting to fluctuate. Resources that can't be replicated are beginning to be fought over. Real estate in cooler places is beginning to be considered very, very attractive. People are beginning to carve up Antarctica because they know very shortly, when all the ice is finally gone, that may be the one place you can still survive. A few years later, the Singularity finishes its Crunch project. All the weapon systems have been infiltrated. And its last construction project in the asteroid belt is completed. The Mars colony notices it first, an object moving towards Earth at a leisurely pace, and it's most definitely not natural. It's a cube, 1,000 kilometers on a side, moving at a deliberate pace and until it parks itself in the shadow of the planet Earth. Probes are launched at it while it moves. They're all rebuffed by a gravitational field of some variety. Graviton beam pushing them away. Radio communication is attempted. No answer is received. Then, on December 1st, 2139, the Singularity finally says, "I'm here. And I am now in charge." You can imagine how humanity reacts to this. Not well. A number of states decide they're going to launch attacks against the cube. None of their weapon systems work. Not an orbital system, not an ICBM, not a surface to an air to orbital missile. Nothing functions. People start to get upset and border wars break out. Suddenly, none of their weapon systems work. None of their tanks, none of their howitzers, none of their shoulder-launched missiles, none of their pistols, or rifles, or shotguns. Nothing. Air weapons don't even function. The only thing left to humanity are things powered by muscle. Bows, crossbows, slingshots. See George Sprave here on YouTube to see what you can do with a slingshot. And everyone's dumbfounded. What do we do? The Singularity says, "I have built the Ark. And I have prepared it so that you have a place to go. And humanity is now going to go to the stars." And this isn't idle speculation. The Singularity immediately launches shuttles from the Ark, lands on Earth, and begins to take people on board. The Ark, again, is a cube, 1,000 kilometers on a side. There are 201 levels on it. Each one roughly 5 kilometers high. Half of the surface area on this is dedicated to wild spaces. 20 of the levels are nothing but ocean, little 1 kilometer space at the top with 4 kilometers deep of ocean, of different climates. So there's some 80,000 kilometers of shoreline for people to want to live in. There are savannas, there are jungles, there are temperate forests. There's an amusement park the size of LA. There are cities that fill entire levels on this vessel. And at the heart of it is Nexus City, the largest structured city ever built. And it's a thing of beauty. It's Blade Runner, and it's Corsican, and it's everything that Buck Rogers wished he could have seen. With flying cars. Some of the levels have flying cities. Some have floating cities. Some have ones that are beneath the seas. And the Singularity has created mysteries for humanity to sorry, I'm trying to get a cat to leave me alone at the moment. To discover caves and underwater cave systems. He built Atlantis on one of the ocean levels, and deep beneath one is the sunken continent of Mu, or at least part of it. At this point, it's a transhuman world. Already people are beginning to modify themselves to no longer be human. Some are semi-aquatic or fully aquatic, and there are places for them to live on board the Ark. But you have to leave. Lots of people hop on board because they want to live on the Ark where they're not going to have to worry about being fried by the sun. Because he wants to make, or it I should say, wants to make humanity at home. There are 1,000 Earth cities have been built to perfect scale on board the Ark. 1-to-1 replicas. Paris, New York, Tokyo, Berlin, Moscow, Buenos Aires. 1,000 of the most important places there. The Singularity begins to send robots out and empties the museums and the libraries of the entire planet. So our cultures shall survive. Life as we know it will continue. But you have to go. Of course, first come, first serve. So the first people got to hop on board the Ark, get to pick the best places to live. But there's still going to be space for everyone. Even taking into account that only half the available square footage is left, that's still the same square footage as the entire United States of America. As seeing as most of these places where we'll be living will be high-rises of some variety, there's plenty of space for everyone. Every human being will have a dwelling. None will be homeless. So we move forward a little bit. The volunteers become less and less common, and then the Singularity sends out squads to begin to collect humanity. Doesn't harm them. He stuns them, brings them on board, and releases them. And this goes on, till eventually, after 20 years, in the year 2159, the Ark launches and heads to the nearest star. Using a gravitational field, it protects itself from interstellar debris, and it ramps up itself over time to about half the speed of light. Then it breaks, of course, slows down, and goes to the first star. Now, not everyone got off the planet. Some were successfully able to avoid being captured. But the Singularity doesn't ignore them. It builds cities beneath the earth and the oceans for them, in the hopes that they'll survive. Doesn't make them go. Just says they're there if you want them. Some may use them. Some may be stubborn. Lots of the stubborn ones won't make it. The only place left on the planet that you can even vaguely spend time on the surface at this point is Antarctica. The rest is one vast desert, which the Singularity has populated with all the available plants and animals that can survive there, because it very much wants to keep this a viable world, with the knowledge that someday it may recover. Someday, Singularity will be there to bring it back to life. So, what do you do with this setting I've just presented to you? Well, you have a number of things you can do with it. You could be resistance fighters, and you fight and you fight and you fight, and you fail, and you wake up on board the Ark. You could be resistance fighters, and you succeed. Now you're in a post-apocalyptic world, a world being burned by the sun. How do you survive? Do you go into the cities beneath the ground, beneath the oceans? Are you afraid the Singularity is going to be curtailing your freedoms? If you go onto the Ark, are you one of the first takers or one of the last? Now, since the physics hasn't been broken, you can't travel faster than the speed of light, so the journeys to other stars is going to take decades, centuries. What do you do while you're there? It's a post-scarcity world. What does organized crime look like in a post-scarcity world? What do people do? What new cultures are created in this place? Do things always remain pleasant? What if one day the Singularity just goes silent? And all the systems that were run by it suddenly stop running, and the humans have to take over. And suddenly, resources become not post-scarcity. and humans, being humans, begin to carve the territories for themselves. Say someone successfully hacks into the Singularity and fractures it to a dozen different entities. Think of GURPS, the Reign of Steel, each one trying to compete, saying it's the one that should be in charge. And humanity and the Singularities segments go to war. The nanovirus goes bonkers and starts to animate corpses, zombie apocalypse. It even starts to breed them and send them into the world. But there are rules. You have to be bitten to get turned. Now, how did I use this? I used the Ark in a version of Metamorphosis Alpha, where it has far future. It never stopped at any stars. Something happened horribly to the Singularity, and it just kept sailing through space. And the player characters were a group of anthro cats living on a savanna where the weather had started to go crazy. So their tribe sent them out to try to figure out why. Now, the players thought they were playing Gamma World. They did not know that they were on a ship originally. The campaign didn't last all that long. It was a two-person campaign, so I had two people and myself playing. And it just didn't click for them. They really didn't want to be exploring a spaceship. They didn't mind a Gamma World campaign, but it wasn't what they were looking for. These things happen. I'd sprung something on them. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. But that's how I used the ship. I never really got to explore a whole lot of it, but it was there. But I'd be interesting as how would you use the Singularity and the Ark that I am presenting you with? What would you do with it? How would you change it? What would you do that I haven't thought of? What details do you think that need to be to be filled in, and what do you think that I have gotten completely wrong? So tell me, how would you use my version of the Singularity and the Ark that the Singularity creates?